This week on Lewis on the Law, I've got another great show for you. I have attorney Michelle Namer on with me, and we're going to talk farm law.
Welcome to Lewis on the Law.
Powerful beyond measure. That is the word of the day. So we have a great show going for you. And in the spirit of empowering you, the listener, today we're going to talk a little bit about farm law. I have attorney Michelle Namer on with me, and she is the managing partner of the law offices of Michelle Namer, LLC. But more importantly, she is the founder of the Law Farm. The Law Farm. Okay, or it's called the Law Farm, right? Like, yes. Is it the farm law? Is it the Law Farm? Okay, so that's really intriguing. First time I heard about it, I think you just kind of we're in a group setting and you talked about it, Lawyers for Equal Justice. Actually, I'm going to give them a plug because it's a great organization.
Yes.
But you said that you did this law farm, and I'm just like, what is that? I'd never even heard of it. So Okay, I bite. What is the Law Farm?
I'm so glad that the Law Farm wasn't taken by anybody else when I thought of that one, because it works. People are intrigued.
Yeah, because you think it's like you got a whole bunch of like little attorneys growing up, like corn on the corn stalk or something like that. You
right,
know?
Many visuals.
You just kind of water them, and then you bring out the plow and stuff like that.
We don't do that, but what I do is create a legal hub for the people who are growing on a small scale and sustainable ag, or people who want to really participate in a local food system. I realized in law school that there are lots of folks who don't have access to an attorney, but the people who are taking the risks that it takes to grow our food and produce it and get it out to us are especially in that membership of folks who don't have access to an attorney. And so I decided we need to figure out how to create new ways to get a lawyer on the front end to help folks who are running businesses or producing this food and make sure that they have the same access to legal tools that other people do.
Legal tools? Like, what kind of legal tools do farmers need access to? I mean, do they have legal? I guess you don't think of legal issues affecting the people who grow our foods, but are there legal issues that affect them?
Absolutely. And it runs the gambit. So what I do is a very general practice, and it's an introduction to things for folks. And then when they, come to me and they have very specific questions, I'll dive deeper. But there are laws like the Food Safety Modernization Act that if you're a certain size farm operation, you are required to be, practicing to certain standards for food safety. And you're supposed to have certain types of facilities to be able to process food and to clean it and to get it, packaged and sent out to folks.
Well, that makes sense because you don't want to get E. coli or okay. So
exactly.
So it makes sense that it's because the first time I heard this, I'm like, what kind of laws are there? And, that might be a stupid question from an attorney, but I guess there's a lot. It's
not a stupid question at all. And then it goes back to a really basic level. And a lot of my practice is transactional because on a very simple level, if you're a micro scale farmer, we have a lot of them popping up in Atlanta and in the metro area, and you are farming on someone else's quarter acre or an acre plot, they're just having the right land use agreement with that landowner protects the business itself in a lot of ways. So you can go ahead and put in that forward investment of making soil better, of getting that ready to grow good food and getting, your season ready. Because farmers, it's not just, I create a product and then sell it really quick. They put in months and months of investment into the soil, into prepping beds, into getting seeds grown, into getting to the harvest point, and then they hope that they sell enough to be able to make a profit that year. If the landowner says, ooh, I think I can make more money if I put something else where you're farming. In a lot of cases, without the right land use agreement, they're completely out that entire year if they didn't get a good, harvest in time. So just starting with, that's what I call legal tools, is figuring out how can you draft agreements, how can you have clear policies that will make sure that when you put in that huge risky investment that's months long to be able to make a profit for your business, that it can come to fruition.
Okay, so you're representing mostly, you're dealing with not the landowners, but the people who are leasing the land. Is that true?
That is true.
Okay.
Yes.
So is it? Are you really talking about leasehold agreements and that type of contract?
Yes, absolutely. And the agreements, a lot of times, these small scale farmers are dealing with folks that aren't used to leasing out their property either. So you have two parties entering the game that aren't sure exactly what the rules are, how to play. And because of the investment that farmers put in, and because that's who I, especially cater to, at that point, I want to reach farmers and say, hey, let's get a good lease agreement. It's going to help the landowner in the long run, and it's going to make sure that your investment's protected too.
It just seems like such a risky proposition because it's not like most other things where you're manufacturing something and you have a timetable of, say, 2 months where you're actually going to have a product and you're going to put it on the market. Here, it takes, I mean, a growing season is what, 3 to 9 months?
Sure. When you start in January getting things ready and starting some seeds indoors, you may not actually harvest anything from that plant until June.
So that's a huge risk. What type of person actually is involved in this? Who is your client?
They are very big risk takers. They are people who are bold. They are people who want to, have big ideas of how things should, be grown differently and managed differently. They have, ideas of being able to live a different type of life than what's set out for most, people who grow food. But they are big risk takers, and as a result, I think a lot of them haven't thought about an attorney just because they just decided they're going to grow food and they go forth and they do it the best way they know how. And that's where me with my neurotic legal mind, I'm like, wait, maybe there are a few things we could put in place just to make sure that you're doing the right thing and that you're all going to be good in the end.
Yeah, I can only imagine because I deal with a lot with developers and people who do commercial leases and large real estate transactions. And even people like that, some of the contracts that they come to me with, I'm just like, oh, my God, why didn't you guys consult an attorney right off the bat? Because this thing is a mess.
Right. And I think that, having more farmers who want to scale or who want to be on a very small scale, having more of them is helpful to just diversifying the way we, have access to food. And there are so many cases where they just didn't understand the terms of a contract, even if it was well written, and they lost the opportunity to be farming on the land that they're on, and they have to wait another year to be able to try and find the right place. So it's like it has big impacts. Little things in the language of a contract have big impacts for these folks.
Well, well-written contracts are even more dangerous because they can contain a lot of information especially if one party is sophisticated and the other party is not so sophisticated.
Absolutely.
Then the well-drafted contract can be a deadly weapon.
Absolutely. It's a really good point.
Yeah. So how are we minimizing the legal risks for these entrepreneurs?
It's one great example, and it's something that's in the Georgia statutes for agritourism. A great example of minimizing liability is just making sure that you are minimizing the opportunity for premise liability suits when people come onto your farm. Agritourism is a huge way to educate people about how food is grown, get people excited about local food and sustainable agriculture. But once you invite a person onto the land that you're farming on, you're setting yourself up for liability and the landowner. So Georgia statutes define agritourism as an agricultural endeavor that actually charges for entry, which is an interesting part of our definition. But if you fall into that definition and you have a sign up that states explicitly what the statute says it needs to state at the right size with the right size letters, then you're immune from premises liability in that case. So if somebody were to trip over a shovel, they can't sue you for tripping over a shovel on the farm in an agritourism situation.
Okay,
there are always exceptions to that.
So you threw out some really big words in that little spiel right there, and I don't know what they are because premises liability. I'm going to get you to break that down in a minute. But agritourism, what are you saying there? What is is it like tourists who come along and decide they want to plant a sunflower and then they pop out some sunflower? What is agritourism?
Agritourism, I think in a really broad sense, is just
visiting. Yeah, just give us a big overview
visiting
here
a farm.
You kind of broke it down. Okay.
It's just visiting a farm. It can be for educational purposes. The U-Pick operations where you can go and pick blueberries and strawberries.
Okay, now I got it. Okay, that makes sense.
Into the agritourism realm. There are lots of workshops and hands-on opportunities in farms around the Atlanta area and even in South Georgia. And agritourism on a more focused level is how do we put all of that into an umbrella, protect the folks who are into it, and make it something that's an economical prospect for the farmers in Georgia and for the growers and the people who are making what we call value-added products out of that, which is processing the food into something like jam or bread.
Excellent. Well, we didn't get very far in this first segment. There's a lot to get into here because you threw out a lot of stuff, and I want to make sure we get some detailed information for our listeners out there. But before we go on to this next segment, Michelle, will you give them some contact information for you?
Absolutely. You can always email me at Michelle, Michelle, at thelawfarm.com.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis. I have an excellent show filled with information. If there are any city farmers out there, I know there's some farm-to-table restaurants. Perhaps you can get a lot of stuff out of this show that we're doing today. I have attorney Michelle Namer on with me. And before we move on, I want to let you guys know this show not only airs on Saturday mornings, but it streams nationally on every single major national streaming platform you can think of: Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, you name it. We are even AI compatible. You can say, Alexa, play Lewis on the Law, episode 59 with attorney Michelle Namer, and this show will come streaming out of your AI device. When we get back, we're going to talk about the justice gap in farming. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I have a great show going for you. If you have an idea for a show, you can always give me a call at 404-610-0075. If you have an idea, you can also go to my website, jameslewislegal.com, and go to my last page, my contact page, and hit me with your question, with the topic you'd like to hear, and I'll bring an attorney on to talk about it. You can always email me at james@jameslewislegal.com. I have attorney Michelle Namer on with me, and we are talking farm law today. But before I get into that, I want to go ahead and give you guys a little disclaimer. This show is only meant to provide you with legal information. This show is not meant to give out legal advice. If you have a serious legal issue or you need to talk to an attorney, don't depend on what you hear on this show. Go ahead and hire an attorney to handle your legal issue. This show is meant to empower you, the listener, and give you information that you might need to decide if you have a legal issue, if you have a case, what type of things you need to preserve, and what type of attorney you're looking for. This show is not meant to give out legal advice. Now that I've thrown that out, let's get into some legal information here, because you threw out a lot of stuff in that first segment. You threw it out kind of quickly, and I'm an attorney, so I got some of that. I didn't know agritourism. That was new. That was a new one for me. But I knew some of what you were talking about. But I want to go ahead and make this digestible to our listeners. So You threw out premises liability, and that felt important when you were talking about it. What do you mean by premises liability?
It is important. It's premises liability. It's just a liability that you end up taking on sometimes inadvertently just by having somebody else onto property that you own or that you manage. Mm-hmm. In the case of farming, we're used to...
Wait a minute. Now, who has the liability? Is it the farmer who's renting the property, or is it the landowner who has the liability?
I mean, as an attorney, the quick answer is the person who has the biggest pockets.
Oh, I think I heard that in my torts professor. But she's like, who do you sue? She's like, the guy with the biggest pockets. Look for the biggest bank account and sue them. I mean, every single week during her lectures, it was like, what did I tell you? Look for the deepest pockets.
Right. Yes. Thank you for animating that very well. So, in the case of a small scale farmer who maybe is making, $50,000 a year, you would think it's not an issue. They don't own the land either in a lot of the cases with my clients. And you're right. The landowner is usually the first person you go to.
Or my personal approach is to actually add everybody you can. That way you can go ahead and do discovery on them and run through their bank account information.
Absolutely, which is why I don't disregard the farmer clients that I have as the person who could get sued. And that's a big thorn in your foot to have to deal with when you get sued, is just to figure out, first of all, there's the panic of being sued. Did I do something wrong? Oh, how do I fix this? And all of those feelings and emotions, but then having to hire someone to defend you in that case, whether or not you are the winner of the liability. But with farms, we love, I say we because I homestead as well. So I have a garden that I love bringing people over to. I love showing them how I grow food.
Okay, you homestead. What does that mean? What does homestead mean?
That means I have a home that's just on like a third of an acre, very suburban world, but I like to grow as much as I can and produce as much as I can. So you're
farming in suburbia here?
I am farming in suburbia.
Nice. Okay, yes. So this is a total aside. What are you growing?
Right now, I'm growing peanuts, organic peanuts, which is a big deal in Georgia. It's very exciting. I have peanuts growing and corn and sweet potatoes And I just finished off a crop of broccoli that actually made it through the summer. So that was fantastic.
Wow, that
And a
is
few fruit
fantastic.
trees.
And do you like farm enough where you can actually eat dinner?
Yes, I do. Maybe only a few dinners a year, but it's very satisfying hobby.
Nice,
Yes.
nice.
Yeah. So,
We keep me and my wife. We keep saying we're going to have a garden, and every single year it dies.
I will stay on you about that,
I
then,
know,
James.
It's so sad. I'm just like, we don't need to get any more plants because we're just killing them.
Oh.
And then my wife starts to feel guilty about the plants she's killed, and I'm just like, it's because we didn't water them. And it's 100 degrees outside. I'm just like, okay, so they're gonna die.
Well, we'll talk about gardening off air for sure. We'll have to have that conversation. But just like myself on a small scale, I mean, farmers want people to see what they're doing, especially farmers that are trying their hand at new, sustainable practices and cutting edge ways of trying to, make the farm a closed loop system. They want people to know about it. They get really excited and passionate about their work. But when you're walking around on a farm, it's a lot different than walking around on cemented sidewalks, or walking on a paved trail. There are gullies and holes and unexpected, places that you might turn around, and there's pollinators, and some of them sting. And there's could be poison ivy somewhere that the farmer didn't even notice, and you walk into that. So that you're kind of going out into the wilderness in a sense, and there's lots of ways that you could end up getting hurt. And in that sense, if there's a chance that someone can get hurt and they are there on your property because you asked them to come on, then you open yourself up for that liability. Which, backing up to what I said about the agritourism statute, it does protect the landowner from that liability with that proper signage of, you're taking on risks. You're in a place that's not sterile. You're in a place that's not necessarily set up for easy cruising. So that protects the landowner from that liability. But I think it's really important for farmers or for anyone who's inviting somebody over to understand what level of care they need to take. So if I invite people onto the land, does that mean I need to, do an overview of my property before they come over every single time and look for any danger that might exist? And I would say no, that's not the standard of care that most farmers need to take inviting folks onto their land. But they do need to be aware, if I see a hole and I get used to walking around that hole every day, when I have a volunteer day and I'm having 20 people over to the farm, it may behoove me to go ahead and fill in that hole and make sure those things are, cleaned up as much as possible to not have any excess danger.
Now, are volunteers, do they require any different status from people who are basically coming onto your property to pick strawberries? Well,
the volunteers, in a sense, especially
if you invite the volunteers and then you charge people money to for a barrel of strawberries, are there any different standards there?
I think there may be. I think they're very similar in a sense, though, because the volunteer, you're asking them to come onto your property to help you improve it and to prepare you for growing season. In that sense, you are making money off of that volunteer coming in the long run. So I can see where they could be, very easily compared. So it's not like they're coming to pick produce, but they are coming to improve what's there and to make you a little bit more money or to make your life easier, save you a cost of some sort. I haven't seen any specific case law where it's been defined any differently, but that's how I tease that out.
Okay, so let's just take a hypothetical here. Suppose Tom Cruise comes onto your party, and I don't know if I'm going to get into any trouble by using a real person's name. Say he's like, "Oh my God, those are great apples! I'm going to climb over this fence and climb onto their property and pick some apples." And lo and behold, he falls out of the tree. Are you liable for that?
Oh.
I mean, is this
feel
type
like
of
I'm
thing
back
wouldn't
in a
take
torts
issue?
final right now.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm just wondering.
So it depends, and that's the quick lawyer answer, right?
Yeah,
it depends, but I don't think so. I think if you have a proper fencing up, and you're trying to keep people out of the areas where you don't want them to be. Hold on, back up. Did Tom Cruise fall out of the tree, or did he eat the apple and get sick?
Is there a difference? That's a good one.
I could see there being a difference. Absolutely.
Okay. I was thinking he just fell out of the tree because he's a terrible climber.
Because going back to the apple, if it was the apple, then you have to wonder: are you spraying anything on your apples that people need to be notified about, or that could a pesticide that could cause illness before it's rinsed off properly before it leaves your farm? There's so many nuances.
Okay, there are a lot of nuances.
If he falls out of the tree, I'm going to go out on a limb, pun absolutely intended, and say that you are not liable. However, that doesn't keep him from suing you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's important to have the fence and to think through, what could or couldn't be a liability and to protect yourself as much as possible, because he could file that lawsuit and then you have to, defend that to an extent. You have to show up to write an answer and to prepare, some semblance of a defense. And in that, case, you're wasting your time. You could be growing. You're having to spend money to hire an attorney. So you may not be liable, but it's important to think about that he could file a lawsuit.
Okay, so is this what you're talking about building a strong legal foundation for these entrepreneurs who are farmers?
Sure. Exactly. The strong legal foundation, in my mind, is the way you prevent what could happen. It's the way, especially when you're starting a food or farm enterprise and you're got that entrepreneurial spirit and you want to be around for 10, 20 years growing food and providing it to folks. When you're in that mindset, there is a way to start out to make sure that you have forms that protect you specifically. The courts don't really care about the value of soil, but a farmer really does. So when you get into contract law, you can create that, your own legal land where the soil you cultivate has the value that you need it to. If you're having volunteers come onto your property, you can have a waiver that's, not ridiculous and just saying you waive all liability, but that actually explains, you need to be careful of this. These are the risks of farming. And that's the sort of legal foundation and those legal tools that I hope will keep farmers around for a lot longer.
Excellent. The value of soil. You're throwing out so many things that I really want to dig into, but we are at the end of the segment. So once again, give them some contact information for you, Michelle.
All right. You can contact me directly at Michelle, Michelle, at thelawfarm.com. You can also check out the website, thelawfarm.com, and contact me directly through the website.
My name is James Lewis. You are listening to Lewis on the Law, and this show comes to you each and every single week to empower you, the listener. And this show streams nationally on every single major national streaming platform you could think of: Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. We also air here in the Atlanta area locally, and you can also go to my website where all my old shows are archived. You can go to jameslewislegal.com. I have a video blog page and a podcast page, and you can go through and check out all the old shows. If you need an attorney, I let all the attorneys give their contact information out. So this show will help you find an attorney. If you need help finding an attorney, you can just go ahead and give me a call at 404-610-0075. You can also email me at james@jameslewislegal.com. And if I can't handle your legal issue, I'll try and help you find an attorney or point you in the right direction to find an attorney who can. When we get back, as I promised earlier, we'll actually get into the justice gap. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I have an awesome show going for you guys today. I have attorney Michelle Namer on with me, and she is founder of the Law Farm. And I was incredibly intrigued. And what we're talking about today is farm law, or the laws that guide farmers, farm development. How would you put that?
As the laws that are affecting farmers.
Okay, that's better. That sounds much smoother than what I said. I'm just like, awkward.
No, you're doing great.
Okay. That's good, because I'm like, in my head, I'm like, awkward much, But anyways, okay, so we went through a lot. I'm going to try and move on from that because I could just dig into it. Because when you said, something about the soil and
the value of soil,
that just intrigued me, and I want to get into that. But I'm not going to, because this is a show on the law. So what about the justice gap? I know you were mentioning that. What is the justice gap? Is there a justice gap? I mean, how does that affect farmers?
I think there is. I think, and I noticed this especially in law school, and this is what got me excited about starting my own firm right out of law school and addressing this issue, is that if you fall below the poverty line, you have access to free legal services for some things. Mm-hmm. And if you make $1 million, $2 million, $3 million a year, you're not concerned
right?
about hiring an attorney if you need one. But there's this, healthy middle class. I'd say, like, pulling this statistic out of the air, but like 80% of America, might even be more, that's just, very middle class and can't really hire an attorney, doesn't have the luxury of thinking of hiring an attorney unless something has happened and they have to have it. And That's what I call the what did I call it?
The justice gap?
The justice gap, yes. That's what I call the justice gap, exactly. And so I got really excited about how you can build a firm that makes money, that can run as a business, but that's also directly addressing those issues of that 80% that can't access an attorney for, what might have been considered luxurious reasons, before. But I think they're very important, especially with these farm enterprises and with creating this more diversified food system. How do the attorneys around me that are interested in this create packages, create flat fee arrangements, or create these situations where people who are starting out as farmers can access those legal services that will then help the sustainability of their own business in the long run?
That's interesting. So first, before we even get into that, it just seems this seems like such a niche area of the law, and that word, I always want to say niche, and then someone told me it's like niche, and so I never get the pronunciation right. I tend to argue with people over that, but I'm going to go with the latest person who kind of proved me wrong. He said it was niche. So this seems like such a niche area of law. How did you get into that?
I got into this with my own excitement about local food systems. Is
it just that you're into local food systems and then it just kind of developed?
Absolutely. I've been, like I mentioned in the previous segment, I am a homesteader. So I've been growing my own food for a decade now, in some capacity or another. And that's always been in the back of my mind. How can I support that? How can, I help that be a real thing? And then in law school, it became very clear to me that there are legal tools, that as an attorney, I have another way of helping small scale sustainable agriculture enterprises be more successul.
That is so interesting. So you're kind of in tune with the earth there. Is that? I mean, I don't want to get too hippie on it. I've got some hippie leanings and some hippie tendencies, and as you can tell by the musical selection. But you're like in tune with the earth, and you kind of went from there.
I appreciate the way you coined that. Yes, yeah.
Okay, I get it because I considered myself a land attorney and or a dirt attorney. So. So in the same way, of course, nowadays it's all just mostly in the courtroom, which kind of loses the glamour of it or the ideology of it that I once had.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but we're talking about the justice gap. So how do you bridge that justice gap? How do you reach those people? And what type of services? What bridges that gap?
So I started before I was even a barred attorney. After I took the bar exam, I started the Law Farm blog. And I realized there were just so many pieces of information, especially for small-scale farmers, growers, community gardens, the whole gambit of that. There are so many questions that are in the community that nobody has a clear answer to. So I realized that with the internet and this age of being able to share information so freely, coming up with what tidbits of information I can put out there to clarify things, that was the beginning of it. It was just the blog,
And information is so important. It's one of the reasons I did this show was to start to help people and to kind of do the exact same thing, kind of give people some information to help them decide, if they have a case, if they have a legal issue, what kind of attorney they might even look for. So I thought it would help just to give people like a first step in the process. And that was kind of the goal of my show. But so I want you to tell people that you have a podcast.
I do have a podcast.
Yeah, go ahead, promote yourself.
Season 1 of the Law Farm podcast exists on SoundCloud and iTunes. And if you look for the Law Farm podcast, I think it comes up pretty easily. But there's a big okra flower. There's a giant yellow flower. When you see that and the words "the Law Farm," you've found it.
It's an okra flower. I saw that. I thought it was like a sunflower. I didn't even realize that okra had a flower.
Okra has a gorgeous flower.
Oh, does it?
Yes.
Wow, the things you learn. I mean, I'm just learning so much. And this is sad because my dad and his grandfather and I come from farmers, so we come from farm folk. But I'm completely cityfied, so I don't really know.
Like that word, cityfied.
I'm a city slicker, so I don't know nothing about no farming. But it amazes me, and my grandfather would have known that for sure. But I didn't realize that okra had a flower. It's interesting.
Funny enough, cotton has a very similar flower, but they're pink instead of yellow. It's really nice.
Oh,
it's lovely.
That is amazing.
We totally digress, but I would like to touch on the podcast.
Yeah, we did digress there because I'm like, what? Cotton has a flower too? What?
We won't get into all the horticulture details, but the podcast was a really awesome jump for me to start having conversations with folks who were growing or doing some sort of planting on a community level. I even had a chance to talk with the gentleman who runs the only certifying USDA organic certification, the only certifying agency in the state of Georgia. You can have any certifying agency come do your certification if you want to be USDA organic, but this is the only one located in Georgia, and we got to talk about things like what happens if someone tells you no when you apply for organic certification, and there's an appeals process there. Mm-hmm. So that sort of information is in the podcast and those conversations.
Okay, that is great. So, so you apply for organic certification, someone can and they can tell you no.
I haven't heard of a case of it actually happening, but I guess they could always say no. Yes, yeah.
Okay, so
not always, but there could be instances.
That brings up a huge amount of questions, and maybe I'm digressing, but what is organic certification?
Organic certification, so the federal organic statutes define what organic is, and those were written really with the environment in mind, with all the synthetic pesticides and herbicides that are being used. So the organic certification standards are very clear. It's a little book of regulations of what is organic, and it involves, not using petroleum-based pesticides. It involves not having even wood posts that have formaldehyde on them in the property. And when you
wait a minute, doesn't petroleum come from the ground? So isn't it organic?
Oh, James, we cannot get into that whole conversation.
Okay. Well, I'm like, petroleum?
Bear with me with the word organic. It's the word that has been used, but that's a completely different conversation. I think a beer is involved in that one. But this is what we call organic. So when you go to the store and you see something with a sticker on it that says organic or something on the actual label, that means that they went through the stringent requirements for growing food in that way. If it's a processed food or if it's a meat, then not only did you raise the meat with the somewhat humane standards that are in the standards, but that meat animal also consumed grain or corn or whatnot that was also grown with the organic practices. There's actually, and this was on the Law Farm blog on the website recently, there was some fraud and there was some sentencing, serious sentencing for some grain.
Okay, what kind of fraud?
They were selling grain as organic. I think it was grain. Please excuse me for not having specifics with this, but they were selling a product saying it was organic, and they weren't. They were selling it for such a low price that the other organic distributors of that product, raised their awareness. They were like, "What's going on there?" They did a little further investigation. They realized he was selling something that was not grown organically. So they actually came down on him. Like, he had actual criminal sentencing, and this is really sad ending to the story, but I think one of the main players that was sentenced may have committed suicide even.
Wow.
I know it's a big deal, but it's a huge market, and when you take advantage of that market, it's people look for that label. They know, they have an idea of what that means to them, and you can get top dollar for an organic product.
Yeah, and I'm a perfect example. I don't always follow this rule because a bag of corn chips or Fritos or Cheetos often finds its way onto my desk. But I try to eat organic, and I try to go farm to table and farm raised. And I kind of like the idea of even if I eat meat, that the animal I eat didn't spend its life in a closed little cellar, because you see those horrible documentaries in it. And all of a sudden it brings out your sympathy tears.
It really does. And that's why I get so excited about the farmers that I do work with. And that's why I'm so dedicated to figuring out, how I can be of service from a legal perspective. It's because those are the farmers that you can get to know at the market. You can ask them questions. They eat this up the same way we eat up the final product. They live and breathe trying to grow food that we feel good about.
Nice. So we are already at the end of this segment. Like I said, these segments are going fast. Michelle, will you give them some contact information for you once again?
Absolutely. You can email me directly, Michelle, MICHELLE, at thelawfarm.com.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I want to let you guys know that this show is meant to be your first step in the legal process, maybe to help you decide what type of legal issues you need to preserve if you have a case at all, and maybe what type of attorney or who you're looking for. This show is not meant to provide legal advice. If you have a serious legal issue, go ahead and hire an attorney. That's not what this show is for, and we don't recommend that. Always hire an attorney. If you need an attorney, you can always contact me at jameslewislegal.com. Give me a phone call at 404-610-0075 or email me at james@jameslewislegal.com. And if I can't help you with your legal issue, I may be able to point you in the right direction. When we get back, we're going to continue our discussion about the justice gap and talk about why it might be a good idea to invest in an attorney. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and welcome back. We have an awesome show going for you. I have attorney Michelle Namer on with me, and she is founder of the law firm. And this show does not only air on Saturday mornings here in the Atlanta area, but we stream nationally on every single national streaming platform you can think of: Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. We are even AI compatible. You can say, "Hey, Google, play Lewis on the Law episode 59 with attorney Michelle Namer," and this show will come streaming out of your AI sound device. And how about that for modern technology?
Awesome.
I know, right? Things are moving so fast. Eventually, I'm going to have my whole house set up where all I have to do is say, hey, Charles, or whatever I name my house. I haven't figured out a name for him yet. We call him the Den. So
the Den?
Yeah. Hey, Den, will you go ahead and turn down my lights, play some music for me, and turn on Sports Center?
It sounds like he has a name.
Yeah, I guess it.
Den or
it
Dennis
is.
or
Dennis. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nice. Okay, we're getting somewhere, but we're way off topic here. So we are talking about the justice gap for farmers and how your law firm actually has provided or is creating solutions to fill that gap.
Yes. So one of the biggest solutions that I think I offer are subscription services for business counsel. And in this...
Okay, subscription services. Okay, so where are we going here? Because the first thing I'm thinking about is my Sports Illustrated subscription.
Very different, not as exciting, but definitely important in the long term for a business.
Not more important than Sports Illustrated, though.
Did I insinuate that?
Okay.
My apologies. But so the subscription services, it's a monthly subscription, and some of them go month to month, some of them are 2 months or 3 months. But the idea is you pay a flat fee, and you have unlimited access to me as an attorney to ask questions, because I find it's so important to sometimes be able to ask a question or two and get clarity instead of kind of hoping you have it right and then messing lots of things up that then you have to pay to have cleaned up. So the subscription services start on a really minimum basis of just having unlimited access to me. You can call me anytime, you can email me anytime with quick questions, get that clarity, and then move forward. And then the subscriptions move up with the amount of actual legal services that I provide. So I have one that you can have 2 hours of actual legal services where I might, look over contracts for you if you're about to enter into a new partnership with someone, or 4 or 8 hours of representation if you are about to restructure and take another partnership to another level and actually merge a couple of farm enterprises. Or you want to, begin sales in a new market and you want to be prepared for that thoroughly. So those subscription services clear up lots on the front end that could become big issues on the back end.
Now that sounds, I don't know if you want to get into pricing, but I'm immediately like, wow, that's pretty crazy. I haven't heard of that. I mean, you hear about retainers and flat fees, but the subscription, is this a new attorney model? I think of the very first thing I think of are those online services, and I forget what they're called, but they're kind of big these days, and they're like LegalZoom. I think that's one of them.
It's LegalZoom, and there's another, I think, that does something subscription-y, possibly. So it is new. It's novel. There's one other gentleman who's in New York who does the subscription services for food businesses as well. I was so happy when I found him on the internet. I guess it was a year and a half ago, and I reached out to him. And
so that is what we're talking about. We're talking about something similar to LegalZoom, but specifically for farmers.
Absolutely, yes. And farm entrepreneurs, even better. Like those folks are my, I can't wait to help them out and to team up with them. But it is new. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I thought you were talking. So what, can we get into prices? What are your subscription fees? What type? I mean, I don't know if this is taboo or, you don't want to get into prices on air. I think, you can just say you don't want to get.
I think it's important to go ahead and talk about it. I think transparency is important.
What are you talking about the prices? How good a model is this?
So
and how affordable? Yeah.
Absolutely. So I do want to make it as affordable as possible. And again, like I said, I want this also to be a sustainable firm model that hopefully people can start using to bridge that justice gap. So for my lowest services of just unlimited access to me, which sounds like a lot, but back up a little bit. Farmers and entrepreneurs are busy folks. So even when I say you have unlimited access to me, it's not like they're picking up the phone calling every day with a new problem. It's just,
I have a client like that. I'm not going to name any names, but it's like every now and then you get nightmare clients like that who are like calling you constantly.
Sure. But it kind of wiggles itself out and evens out, and I end up with the right clients in the long run.
Okay.
But that basic service is $500 per month. And that's something that if they're not reaching out to me, I try to do, the best I can to get them to set up meetings with me on a certain day of the week to really get use out of that. Because it's hard to get in the habit of figuring out what to ask your attorney if it's something you've never had access to before. Sometimes it just doesn't make sense that every agreement I make, that's just a word of mouth agreement with someone, I can, pick up the phone and make sure that's good with my attorney. That those sorts of word of mouth agreements may not register as something you call your lawyer for right away when it's something that's new. So I do try to, schedule those meetings and really stay in touch with those clients. But for $500 a month, you can have those quick answers available. Is this an employee? Is this a contractor? How do I make sure that the two are separated? Do I need this agreement in writing, or is this something that we can just do a handshake thing? And for $500,
those are extremely important questions, which have a lot of implications.
Absolutely, and with a specific set of clientele that I have, there are also questions that I become used to answering in lots of different variations. So from the attorney perspective, it's valuable to me. From the client perspective, it's very valuable. It could be a make it or break it situation for their business. So that with that basic subscription for $6,000 a year, you have some semblance of general counsel and that guidance and that advice without having to, fork up the income of $80,000 to $160,000 a year to have general counsel on staff. And I think that would be ridiculous for a small scale, farmer to employ that general counsel. But the services are important.
They are important, and some people's retainers are that much, so it's definitely worth it. So why do farmers need an attorney in the beginning? Why do they need this in the startup? How does this help them?
It helps. Well, it's farming on the level of where you want to do it for a living and you want to be around for 10, 20, 30 years. You want to create a business you can sell. It's just like any other entrepreneurial endeavor. And I think that's important to remember. It's not just, I feel like wearing overalls and playing in the dirt all day. It's I want to create a sustainable business that will feed the people, my local community or, beyond even for larger scale farms. So even when it comes to just setting up the business structure itself, having that conversation of should you be a nonprofit or an LLC is important. It's going to have big implications for, if you plan on writing grants to sustain your business, you may want to go with the nonprofit model, or there's so many questions on the front end that really help to solidify the business plan from a legal perspective and just get all those things, tight and worked out. And then as the business starts growing, do you have a waiver if a volunteer is coming on? Do you have an employee handbook, even if it's a few pages long, that when you do hire somebody to come on to your property and to farm, do they know exactly what best practices that cover you and your farm, do they know what they are? They communicated, clearly so that they can continue that and keep the farm culture very, tight and as liability tight as possible.
And just so that I can weigh in on this, almost all the litigation that people come and hire me for, or all the disputes that people come and hire me for, are all because they didn't have an attorney in the beginning. It's usually almost always based on a contract that that one side is saying cannot be enforced, it's because the property is held in the wrong way, and now they're in a dispute over it, and you can't do that with this type of property held like that. And so if these people had had an attorney set this agreement up in the beginning, maybe paid your $500 fee and had this set up in the proper way, or that would have saved them some $10,000 to $18,000 in litigation costs, because it can cost that much when you're hiring someone and I consider myself fairly affordable and that's at $250 an hour.
Yeah.
There are law firms out there that are $500 plus an hour, and those are the big guys.
I'm glad you said that $10,000 to $18,000 number. I think that's important to hear, and it's so preventable sometimes. Yeah, well, that's what I tell people who hire me for litigation, that it's going to get into that number if this actually goes to trial. Yeah, and that's realistic, and so people have to really take this seriously, and this type of model can help people avoid that. Absolutely. And even this is a sad story, very anecdotal, but even before you get to $10,000 to $18,000 worth of litigation costs, there were a few farmers in Atlanta that wanted to participate in the city of Atlanta's program to, use land that's not being used otherwise that this city and, Georgia Power own. And there were farmers that didn't understand the terms of the contract, and they got kicked off before they even got started. And it's just a shame and a waste of time and resources. We have a lot of stuff to get to, and we didn't even touch on your hemp and medical marijuana farming that people are doing, but we are already at the end of this show. Michelle, give them some contact information for you again. Yeah, please visit thelawfarm.com. You can check out the blog and the podcast through the website, and you can contact me directly at Michelle, Michelle, at thelawfarm.com. You're listening to Lewis on the Law. We are out of time, but I love all of you guys, and I especially love the guys that are making the magic happen here. Our superstar producer over there, Mr. Sam Davis, making sure everything is on time, and the guy producing the videos over there, what's his name? Jonathan Bryant.